I want to examine how Gino Severini evolved from a leading avant-garde painter of the early 20th century, a futurist who called speed the new beauty, to someone who embraced and then developed what was then regarded as a virtually obsolete craft, mosaic, extolling its slow hesitancy. He bequeathed a body of theoretical writings that should be known by everyone concerned with mosaic, particularly in regard to the art as a communal and public process. That's by Boccioni, that's Futurism. Severini was born to a poor family in Cortona, Italy in 1883. From the age of 16, he received an art education in Rome, where he became involved with Italian Futurism, a cultural movement encompassing art and social change, glorifying speed, technology, the car, aeroplane, and industrial city, youth and violence, the punk of its day, well, a bit more violent than that. In 1906, unsuccessful, penniless, and unable to speak French, he left for Paris. Soon he was mingling with the famed habitués of Montparnasse, such as Picasso, Matisse, Modigliani, Diaghilev, Cocteau, and Apollinaire. He absorbed the lessons of Cubism to push Futurism forward, becoming one of its key artists and a leading modernist painter. And this is his Cubist portrait. You can see the difference from the one right at the beginning. Artists at the time were discovering and becoming under the spell at this time of so-called primitive art, African and tribal forms, naive art, a radical change from 19th century ideals. In 1910, Severini signed the Italian Manifesto of Futurist Painters. They wanted to embrace the speed and energy of the new century and sweep away the cult of the past. This is the Speed, picture of Speed by Giacomo Balla. Sweep away the cult of the past, meaning for them the Renaissance in Italy. While the Futurists embodied the tempo of the new world in images of motor cars, aeroplanes, even bicycles, this is the dynamism of the cyclist, Severini, who pursued the fashionable craze for dancing, made the Parisian cabaret his subject. His most famous painting is The Dance of the Pan-Pan of 1909 to 11. And already we can see in the tessellated surface of shifting planes and shapes employed to render the frenzied movement of the dancers, a sensibility closely aligned to the craft of mosaics. This one is interesting because it was destroyed in the Second World War, I think, and a replica was made by him in 1959. These are just two details. And this is in the Estorick. This is called the Boulevard. In 1913, Severini, aged 30, married Jeanne, the 16-year-old daughter of a French poet, Paul Fort, in a civil ceremony. Although raised a devout Catholic, he, with his futurist friends, railed against Catholicism. He declared he had lost faith and was a total atheist. His devotion to his fellow Italian futurists caused him to miss out on a historic exhibition of modern art in New York, the Amory Show, which would have made his international name. However, he exhibited successfully in London, and this is him at his London show, and was impressed by the welcome he received here. This is a Sea Dancer. It's in the Guggenheim in Venice of 1913. The First World War provided a spiritual turning point for Severini. Always prone to ill health, although he lived to be 83, he was turned down for service in the armed forces. The close-knit family lived out the duration in France, where his daughter Gina was born in 1915. In career terms, 1916 was excellent. Severini was taken up by an influential Parisian gallerist who set in train his growing artistic success. Despite reaching this high point, this is the Red Cross trains coming in. He did a series of war paintings. Despite reaching this high point, the family was always short of money and lodgings. In this year, Severini's son Tonio was born and shortly afterwards died. as Severini tells it in his autobiography, the victim of his parents' poverty. It was a blow from which he said he never recovered. And you could see the difference between this painting and the previous painting, the change in his attitude. Between 1917 and 1918, he went through a prolonged period of illness and convalescence. The consequent period of isolation encouraged interior contemplation. By 1918, with the end of the war, religious questions began to stir in him. In his autobiography, The Life of a Painter, Severini gave us reasons for his shift in beliefs, the cruel loss of his son, and the premature death of his closest friend, the artist Umberto Boccioni, whose work you saw at the beginning. Both died in 1916. In addition, the post-war period was for everyone a time of anxiety and disorder, where all certainties had been swept away in the face of the atrocities and privations of the Great War. Severini was led to aspire, he said, towards a truth superior to art, and, driven by an internal need of the heart, he and Jeanne found confirmation in their renewed faith. The couple baptized their daughter Gina in 1919 and renewed their marriage vows in a religious ceremony in 1923. Severini began to criticize the emptiness of the modern art experience, denouncing with the same fervor used in the Futurist Manifesto the very abstraction he had once been instrumental in founding. The artistic advances of the avant-garde were for him empty at heart, based on a decadent individualism and materialism. He had a desire to communicate with a public beyond the elite who frequented the Parisian galleries. In 1923, he met the French philosopher Jacques Maritain, who had also rediscovered his Catholic faith. In Maritain's book Art et Scolastique of 1920, Severini found a philosophy of aesthetics that accorded with his own, and the two set out on a collaborative path to reconcile art and morality. It was ultimately religious art in the form of a mural decoration that provided the chance for Severini to realize a more universal form of communication. The first of his ecclesiastical commissions came in 1924, and between then and 1933, he was almost exclusively engaged in a series of murals in the churches of Switzerland. This is Lausanne. He published a treatise on ecclesiastical decoration. Thanks to his friendship with Maritain, Severini became one of the first artists in Europe to renew sacred art in the light of the artistic languages of the avant-garde. He ended his biography at the point in 1924 when he set out to decorate the church of Semsal in Freiburg. He said, "I was soon to undertake a serious collective social experience in the mural arts, essentially in the role of a manual labourer." For him, it was the collective and social component that gave the vast public projects their moral edge. And he was led to an important decision. The most durable material for a mural was mosaic. He had already visited the renowned Byzantine mosaics of Ravenna before the First World War, an encounter which proved to be a profound revelation. When he stood before the portraits of Justinian's court in San Vitale and saw the face of Archbishop Maximianus, and you can see him, go back there and stop it. There he is. I haven't got a close-up of Maximianus, but I did in the article in Andamento do a close-up, and you can see what I'm going to try and point out next. He said he met an art that accorded so well with the aspirations of our generation. This was the primitive strength of form he saw in the work of Cézanne and Van Gogh and perhaps Picasso's Demoiselle of 1907, which I have shown you. This is Severini, 1946, Ahead of Christ. And Van Gogh, you can know very well, and Ahead of Self-Portrait by Picasso. And I think you can see there's a similarity in all of the ways that those images are expressed. Severini climbed up on the scaffolding to see how the smalti were laid and was impressed by the way the angled tesserae bounced the light around, revealing to him a new concept of form and space that he could relate to Cubist space. To continue his research, he sought advice from the famed Ravenna School of Mosaicists, who were then at work on restoration, from whom he learned the craft. However, he thought that simply returning to the past, copying the imagery of Byzantium, would be a profound error, albeit that the ancients had important lessons to teach modern artists. They were able to reconcile the visual elements that made their mosaics supreme examples of both decorative and fine art. And this, I think, is the important lesson of Severini, is the combination of decorative and fine art, and I think that relates to the discussion that was had earlier about art and the galleries. Between 1933 and 1938, let's just edge forward on this, Severini, by now a reputed artist and writer, embarked on a series of high-profile, large-scale public mosaic murals in Rome, Padua, and Milan in collaboration with the foremost mosaic workshops of Italy. In 1935, first prize in the Rome Quadrennial allowed him to resettle in Italy, where he remained until 1946. Two of the most important commissions were mosaics for the interior of the Palazzo di Giustizia in Milan in 1936, and the 38-metre-long facade of the main post office in Alessandria, Piedmont, 1938 to 40, which you see here stretched out, although it actually doesn't show everything. The writer and philosopher, and you'd think it would be up high, but actually it's very close to ground level if you find photographs of it. The writer and philosopher Umberto Eco, name of the rose, grew up with this mural and said, "I have spent days and days thinking about these mosaics, dreaming, embarking on countless adventures between chimney stacks, propellers, turbines, mounted messengers, apes, crocodiles, and Aztec monarchs." Just a couple of details. There's the chimney stacks. Anybody been to see this? Because I would love to see this. And for Milan law courts, Severini made 5 panels of the attributes of justice. These originally contained the fascist emblem, later removed, but Severini had created universal depictions beyond specific ideology. Here you can see just blind justice with her scales. He loaded the images with symbols of justice, impartiality, truth, right and wrong, and of good balanced against and overcoming evil to bring forth peace and abundance. In this one, you can see the date palm, which is abundance, and the line at the bottom, the white line at the bottom, is a removed fascist symbol, the fasces. And St. Michael over the city, doing justice. The feathers of the ostrich, I think, are to weigh the balance of the soul. Severini, with other leading Italian artists, was chosen in 1937 to decorate Mussolini's Foro Italico, just outside Rome, his colossal sports complex. Built between 1928 and 1938, vast pavements of black and white mosaics were inspired by those of nearby Ostia Antica. Mussolini personally recalled Severini from France to work on this project, as he was renowned as the foremost mosaic artist of the time. I was just discussing with Lillian, there were several other mosaic artists, Italian artists, who were really excellent, who were there. He was entrusted with the most prestigious images in Il Duce's personal gym. Now, unfortunately, you can't get hold of any pictures of those. I've just seen some sideways pictures of a symbol of Il Duce's birth sign, which I can't remember now which one he was, Scorpio or something, and an image of fascismo. So they were very, very fascistic to look at. However, Severini's allegiance to fascism is problematic, but considered to be pragmatic. He paid lip service, because they all needed to be in the right place at the right time, but a letter reveals probable membership of anti-fascist groups. I think Severini was very charming and got himself to where he needed to be. Afterwards, and this shows that he might have been on the wrong side of where he needed to be that time, public commissions dried up. Severini had fallen out of favour with the authorities. He concentrated on, this is the Hunters. He concentrated on small easel mosaics, a genre which he had once denigrated because they lacked a social dimension. His favourite collaborator from the Ravenna school, Maestro Antonio Rocchi, executed them for him. This is actually the bit I can't quite work out, how much he made and how much he had made for him. It's a little bit contentious, I think, in that area. The last great religious commission was the Via Crucis mosaics in the Cathedral of Cortona. Just look at these for a moment. These are some of the private easel mosaics. I think these are the kind of things that some of us might be interested in, how he used the actual form. You can see this one here is very, very cubist. They're all in private collections. And here he is. This is one of the favourite pictures of him, taken in 1954 with one of the mosaics. And though he's standing in front of it and he has on his hat, it's called the Pietra Santa hat, it's made out of paper, and it's the hat of the master mason, and they still use them in Italy. I don't know how much of this mosaic he made and how much he simply designed and had made for him. But he's got himself pictured as the maestro, the master. The last great religious commission was the Via Crucis mosaics in the Cathedral of Cortona, his hometown, in 1946. He returned to Paris and there founded in 1950 a school of mosaic, inviting the Ravenna mosaicists as teachers. The school was known for its unique mix of theory and practice. Severini's aim was to produce, with a rounded education based on historic and contemporary art and a thorough mastery of the craft, mosaic artists rather than skilled artisans. Only then could there be what he called a real mosaic, meaning a work where there was a constant interchange of ideas between the cartoon, its translation into mosaic, and the architectural context. He said, "I would like a mosaic to be made as a mosaic and not a painting translated into mosaic, as happens today." And this is the cartoon, his cartoon for one of the Via Crucis mosaics. Just flip back and see the difference between the cartoon and the mosaic. This one's probably quite familiar because it's on all the websites. I love the lion and that. He despised instinctive mark-making styles like Jackson Pollock's drip technique. He could not see that a solid work of cultural value could emanate from such origins. Chance had no place in mosaic making, where everything must be prepared in advance, he said. But he also endorsed a mosaic art where the medium itself had the final say. And this is where I think he must have done some work. For him, the indirect method, even in the hands of a skilled craftsman, was a quasi-mechanical process that produced a dead result. He deemed the direct method the only method with any validity, for only then would the mosaicist hear the mysterious voices of the stones. He spoke of the tesserae as having a vibrant life of their own, demanding precedence over the original cartoon, an effect only a mosaicist could experience and understand. Antonio Rocchi said of him, he was not himself an expert mosaic maker, but he was a connoisseur of the art of mosaic. He knew its potential and its limitations. He understood that what made a mosaic distinct from painting related precisely to the discontinuity of its surface, to the manipulation of materials, and the modulation of light. For this reason, he was scathing about the practice of employing as designers famous artists who then signed the work as their own without touching a single tessera. They would then be feted, while the mosaicists themselves were regarded as mere performers. But the work suffered, he said. In 1951, an exhibition of copies of the great Ravenna mosaics made by the modern Ravenna mosaicists was held in Paris and in London. I was here in London at the time, but too small to go. I'm sorry about that. It was a great success. Severini wrote the catalogue introduction. The next year, at a conference in Ravenna, he gave a lecture now immortalized in Italian and in French as Mosaic e Art Murale nella Antichità e nei Tempi Moderni, where he details the lessons to be drawn from ancient mosaic that could infuse modern mosaic making with the life that had drained from it since the Renaissance. Thus, he helped facilitate its resurgence in the 20th century, and thus his name that he was given, not by me, but by his fellow mosaicists, the father of modern mosaic. He urged that mosaicists should be sustained by formal discipline and at the same time be open to the mystical moment when the stones themselves take life. He insisted that designer and mosaicist should be close collaborators, and the idea that mosaics were merely paintings in stone be swept away. He died in 1966, and his pioneering work has remained largely unknown for 60 years. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Lillian Sizemore. Thank you very much for having me. And I'm going to follow up on what Ilona was talking about. So thank you, Ilona. I'd like to get a quick show of hands. Quick show of hands. How many of you would describe the process of making mosaic as meditative or contemplative? Just quick show of hands. So a massive amount here. And then who among us feels that you have a true connection to your materials? And by that I mean the materials speak to you, or they inform important decisions about how you make and what you make. Show of hands. Almost everyone. So the reason I'm asking is because I'm going to be speaking to two main points around what Severini called il fare. It's the making. And I'll be quoting from my translation of Severini's 1952 speech titled Mosaic and Mural Art in Antiquity and in Modern Times. And this is a very dense philosophical speech in which he explores the spiritual and technical approaches of mosaic art throughout antiquity and compares it to the modern art movements, as you heard from Ilona's talk. So I'll touch on Severini's analysis of technique, process, practice, and manual dexterity, mixed with a spirit, intuition, and what he calls poetic knowledge. And I'll also address how spirituality and materiality factor into this concept of il fare. Severini's active correspondence with the French Catholic philosopher Jacques Maritain marked a major reinforcement of Severini's own theories. They debated the philosophical notion of the means as an indivisible balance of both intuition and process in art. They also used the term integrity to mean something in which the notion of perfection or completeness is fully expressed. Quoting Severini, these Byzantine artisans were poets in their own right. They had a spiritual intent, and that was primarily the exaltation and glorification of their faith. They also had a material goal in the function of the work and its destination in a church or a baptistry. They had to take appropriate means to mediate the spiritual and the practical ends. This accord between art and craft refers to the notion of integrity. Today, however, this accord is often missing. This integrity cannot exist when one demands art from one person and the craft from another. The origins of this work are in the depths of the soul, where intelligence, sensibility, and imagination unify to shape the intuition that expands within the spirit. End quote. So I'd like to address just how this accord is related to il fare. Some years ago, I learned a little poem that included drawing a looped form while reciting, "My thinking and my doing serve the heavens. My doing and my thinking serves the earth." This is poetic knowledge, a kind of dual neurological activity of reason and intuition, or as we say more commonly today, left brain and right brain. Going back to the meditative quality of mosaic work, here we're able to enter this mysterious space of creative flow. It comes when the two parts of the mind meet in the middle. In antiquity, mosaic making was already identified with its intuitive source, beyond the purely mechanical. In fact, mosaic is considered the highest art of the muses. When Severini broke down il fare, which translates as both to do and to make, he's referencing this twin ability to make art from a place of deep vision matched with the appropriate means of expression. It's in this place that Severini finds the affinity between Byzantine art and modern art, citing, for example, the works of Cézanne, Seurat, and Van Gogh. As you saw in Ilona, is some of these same images. Quoting Severini, "For these ancient artists, this identification between subject and object is both mystical and realistic. Today's debate on the separation of the contemplation from the rational leaves us, today's debate on the separation of the contemplative from the rational leaves us with a deeply negative impact on the emotionalism of art. Vision, workmanship, and technique, these are indivisible." End quote. So il fare is the thinking and the doing, but also identifying mosaic as form, as the means that have the value in its own right, which brings us to the next point. Spirituality and materiality. So let's explore how this relates to il fare, spirituality and materiality. Quoting Severini, speaking about the Byzantine period, "These mysterious stones in the hands of this true mosaicist aroused an infinity of things to say. Intelligence and sensitivity, imagination and intuition, everything was awakened by contact with a new spiritual and material reality. Through the slow and silent work of the mosaicist, the colors and forms speak in ways that could not be expressed in any other way." End quote. Severini speaks of the drive to make work that encompassed a life lived, work that expresses joy, struggles, anxiety, passion, and especially for murals, work that was intimately linked to a sense of place. Severini quotes Maritain here. "This extremely intense artistic activity does not refer to a need to communicate with others, but it is a drive to create even if there were no one to see it." End quote. So think about that moment when you're just in it, and you move a tessera slightly one way or the other, refining, because it must be done. You're seeking a quality, a sensitivity within yourself, and that's what he's talking about here. As artists, our job is to translate what is felt and perceived and experienced. We can create a gateway to this invisible realm, not just for ourselves, but for all viewers, so they may too feel uplifted through our creative endeavors. Here's Severini speaking in exalted terms about how il fare feels. "The hand trembles, the line seeks a direction, the color breaks free from where it has been placed. One feels that the maker is agitated for fear he can't attain the full expression in all the force and profundity he has dreamt. Here the tessera have a willingness that needs to be interpreted outside of the cartoon and even in opposition to it." End quote. So Severini's challenging us to approach our work with such abandon that it will speak unmistakably to our innermost passion. As professional artists immersed in this ancient legacy, we must choose to hone our technical skills and our instincts, to risk the possibility that there may be something at work that is greater than ourselves. Though Severini's essay has been shelved for more than 60 years, his ability to articulate this process remains familiar today. Quoting Severini, "In the hand of the master mosaicist, everything takes on life, from the martellina to the stone to the smalti. Even the hands are restless, already vibrating and radiant, like the legs of a dancer who is about to go on stage." End quote. Severini trusted that mosaic could be a powerful force in reestablishing order and clarity in a fragmented modern world. He was so passionate about the art of mosaic, he established an academy in Ravenna that still exists today. He advocated for classical art training, including the history of art, geometry, composition, and color theory. Translating this speech was an intense immersion that has enabled me to see what I do as an artist maker from a more integrated place. I had read snippets of this lecture, enough to know it provided the license, so to speak, for a self-discovery of Il Fare for myself. So this is why I was drawn to revive what Severini had to say in English. Working intuitively, letting the materials speak to me, and using a meditative process, these are all means that I use to create my own art. These are means I use to create my art, both as a maker and a teacher, and my research into Severini's philosophy has enlightened my work, and I hope it will do the same for you. As fellow makers, I hope you'll be inspired to look deeply at not only the motivation for your subject matter, but the reason you choose to work with mosaic in the first place. May you feel more energized than ever before to listen to the stones and to imagine your mosaic work as a powerful union of artistic vision and quality workmanship, and to say something that cannot be expressed in any other way. Thank you.